find the diplomacy. Also on the show, Magufuli's stance on COVID-19 that went viral, plus what others say, and a new suluhu for Tanzania, or is she? A snapshot of the new Madam Sheriff in Dar es Salaam. On Yvonne's take, have we become crybabies? Just ask Colonel Oguna. The Dubai masterclass that cost us an arm and a leg is on the memo. Kaikai's Kika is a tribute to the man who led from the heart and shot from the hip. Ashuri punches into the mysterious ways of your MP, while the angle tonight is squarely on the mutation and the new variant of ODM. All right, so tonight our sign language interpreter is Wilson Mushora. Let's start this show. Ladies and gentlemen, so last night, the news that a lot of people had been speculating about finally coming out of Dar es Salaam, or shall we say Tanga, because it looked like a very sort of hurriedly put together address to the nation there by Samia Suluhu Hassan, who's really right now poised to become the first female president of that country. Linus, I start with you.
Joe, such a sad week, and I just want to mention that back here at home, we lost Robin Njogu, our colleague, who would tonight be watching and would normally be giving us feedback on a day like this.
And sending lots of alerts on our phones.
Yes, yeah. and basically helping us to put together this show. It's such a sad week. But to the question of Tanzania, 18 mysterious days where information was not flowing, and Kenyans had a field day for whatever reasons. I mean, Magufuli is Tanzanian, but the internet was so active in Kenya, of asking where he is. There was speculation that he was at the Nairobi hospital, and then at some point they flew him to India, and I don't know how he got back, but the news came through yesterday that he is dead. There are questions about the handling of the information, and the only thing that can be said here, Joe, is this is typical of the National Intelligence Services. A prominent leader, a person of that stature, a president, can only die when the intelligence services decide, yes, it's time to announce that death. My memory goes back to the first time I interacted with Tanzanian political space, and that is in 1999 when the retired president Julius Nyerere died, and he had been hospitalized in London, suffering from leukemia. And one thing that was really noticeable and notable that time was there were these frequent updates about the state of the president. And then the announcement of the death happened on the 14th of October. But when we landed in Dar es Salaam with my late colleague Johnson Baraza, one of the news that we were told was, look, they manage information, and Mwalimu could have been dead maybe a few days earlier, because they need to put in place the state processes that go with the death of such a high-profile individual. So it's not a surprise that for Magufuli, we had this huge gap. There's something else that could have been a very, very good indicator of what was going on. When the vice president briefed yesterday, you noticed there were two critical dates. There was the 6th of March, when the president was taken ill and admitted at the heart hospital heart division in the Muhimbili hospital, the biggest hospital in Dar es Salaam. And then she mentioned the second date, 14th yeah. of March, saying that the president was then moved. He felt ill again, yeah, and was moved to the Mzena Hospital in Dar es Salaam. Something can be said about Mzena Hospital. Mzena Hospital is an hospital that is run by the National Intelligence Service. It's called the Tanzanian Intelligence and Security Services, TISS. And it's named after the founding chief of that organization, that is Emilio Mzena. Emilio Mzena is the equivalent of the late Kanyotu, very powerful individual that served under President Nyerere between 1961 and 1975. So when the president is moved to this hospital, you obviously know it's not a regular hospital. It is a hospital where the management of information, the management of processes will be completely different. So you could have a patient in there that you will hear nothing about, you will see nothing about, like we did for the last 17 days, 18 days of Magufuli. When he went to Mzena on the 14th, so where was he in the last 3 days? Did we get any update like we used to get in 1999 about Mwalimu Nyerere? I think the intelligence services were taking charge and managing the flow of information so that it's released in such a way that it's not going to cause panic in the country. And also, remember, this is the first serving president of Tanzania to die in office.
Yeah.
So there is a transition of power.
Right.
Nyerere was a different ballgame because he's retired.
Yeah.
As much as he had a big name, very highly respected, here was an institution that was still running the presidency of Magufuli, meaning then they needed to do things like transition of power from him to the vice president. One last thing, you could notice the announcement was made in Tanga and not Dar es Salaam, not in State House. You can tell from the backdrop that was used there. Ordinary curtains, no coat of arms and
it
things
really
like
was
that.
makeshift.
No flags.
Yeah.
No
flags, yeah.
You can tell possibly there was a decision to hurry this up. And they had to catch up with the vice president wherever she was. She was in Tanga at the time.
I mean, there was an additional challenge, I would imagine, that in this day and age, I mean, fine, the intelligence people will do what they do, but in the day of social media, there's a point beyond which you cannot take chances.
Yes, and that is the risk they must have decided to run away from. If the president had been dead for a few days before yesterday, as we want to assume, then the call had to be made that, do you want this to actually break out on the social media? You don't want that to happen.
And of course, considering, so when you talk about social media, I was thinking after the announcement was made, and even before, about the speculation all across. And in fact, someone was saying these days he wakes up in the morning, prays, eats, and then checks social media about the status of President Magufuli. Even as Kenyans, we were frantic every single day. You want to know where President Magufuli is. And it's almost impossible in this age of social media and camera phones that no one knew where he was for 18 days. And I was thinking about how in this world that everything is subjected to some form of digital tracking. If he had been moved from one country to another for treatment or whatever it was, how come no one knew anything about it? In fact, it reminded me of when there were all these speculations about the health of President Robert Mugabe, the former president of Zimbabwe, about where he was. How many times have we been told that Robert Mugabe is no more? Yeah. But going to the point about managing information, as late as Wednesday, Samia Suluhu Hassan had spoken in Tanga saying nawaletea salamu kutoka kwa Rais Magufuli. A day before that, the Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa, was it in Friday, he said he had spoken to the president and he had blamed all these stories going around about his health to some what he called hateful Tanzanians living abroad. Speculation was rife, but then it shows you how difficult it is to try and manage information and situation such as what you're talking about, Linus, in a country where the president has passed away in office, and then you try and look at how are you going to handle if this has not happened again in Tanzania and do the transition, number one. Number two, there were all this speculation going on, but the main ones were he's either ill, he's incapacitated, or he is dead. Which of the three could it be? Because if he was okay, he would have come out and spoken.
But it is interesting.
That happened to him last year. There was a time he disappeared for some days, and then he came out and even was swearing in, I think, some government officials. So the fact that no one had seen him in all those days really raised a lot of questions.
And I remember when the vice president was in Tanga, actually she talked about or rather mysteriously, that kukaguliwa ni kawaida. Talked about Watanzania tupendane, ugonjwa ni kawaida, basically trying to say it is normal for people to be sick, just falling short of saying that there is someone who is sick somewhere, and you guys need to stop the rumors. And Yvonne, as we say in this profession, that you don't believe a rumor until the government denies it. And that happened. I mean, in Tanzania, Tanzania, there was a lot of denying of what was going on, like, oh, let's stop spreading the rumor. But the question was,
so
if we stop the rumor, what should we spread? Because there was really
no truth or no information. And just to continue talking about the denials, as Jamila had mentioned, the Prime Minister on Friday, March the 12th, had said he was healthy and continuing with his duties as usual. And then just the following day, the Regional Police Commissioner in Kinondoni, had come out in a press conference and said, we will arrest them all, talking about all these people who were spreading rumors about the ill health of the president. The Minister for Constitutional and Legal Affairs threatened prosecution to anybody who was spreading rumors. In fact, I believe one person was arrested, at least on that day, but there was 3 more who were arrested for supposedly, spreading posts about his ill health. And I guess the reason there was so much speculation is that, President John Pombe Magufuli was a man who was very visibly present, I think much in the way that we had experienced the late President Daniel Arap Moi. He was in the press almost every day, every other day. He was, inspecting projects and, speaking to his ministers. And so for a day or two, for him to not be present, I think, that was obviously the first sign of it. And I just wanted to add to the timeline of what Samia Suluhu had said, to just add on to what Kai had said. On the 6th of March, he was taken to the Jakaya Kikwete Cardiac Institute. And then they said on the 7th of March, he returned home to continue with his duties.
A day later.
A day later. And then we hear that 7 days later, he was taken ill again and then taken to hospital. And there were no updates throughout that time. I mean, unlike the time of Julius Nyerere, where perhaps he had died days before, but we're not told, but at least the fact that he was unwell and receiving treatment in hospital was something that was a regular update that was given to the people. But here we're told, he's well, he's doing okay, when, it is pretty obvious that he wasn't. And I think, in that time of trying to just conceal everything, the rumors and the speculation was just rife. Was he here? Was he in India? Was he where? I think for me that was something that was interesting, perhaps a lesson going forward in how we manage information. There might not be everything that you tell people, but it was pretty obvious for the last 18 to 19 days then.
Which points to something, Francis, that I think I noted throughout this, that actually the age of social media is making that so-called information management even more difficult, because, I mean, you will hold on to it and probably you have the right information, but people go spreading all kinds of rumors. I am sure that a lot of things that people said online were not true. I mean, surely I do not believe that he went to India, for example. I think that would have been someone somewhere would have picked it. I mean, from here to India, whatever. We don't know whether it was in Nairobi. Probably it was, who knows. But there are all of these things that people started saying that by the time the news was breaking last night, actually, I was tracking what some of the people were saying online, and people were saying, no, this is not breaking news. It is just a confirmation of what we've...
It's an update.
It's an update of what we've already, had for the last couple of days. And so social media, a totally different ball game now.
This is 2021, Joe. This is not 1975. I mean, two things. Either, let me say what I said here last week. You either give people the correct information, or you give them the opportunity and allowance to speculate. You cannot deny them both. You cannot ask them not to speculate and at the same time not give them information. Choose one. And especially in this day of social media, and it's a digital world, and many things are happening at the same time and people are aware. And at the same time, it is important to know that almost in even the most discreet of places, somebody somewhere will have a source right inside there, so they will know what is happening.
Have a phone.
Actually, from 27th of February is when we should have started to count the days and to track the whereabouts of John Pombe Magufuli. Talk about 4th, 5th, 7th, even 14th. All those dates, the first place to go is 27th of February 2021. That is the last time he was seen in public. And so for a president who was very present, who was always out there, even in some scenarios very impromptu in nature, that he was absent since February, almost to another almost 1 month, something somewhere was happening. And probably they ought to have told us, or even told the country and told the world that he's unwell. It's not a mistake for a leader to be unwell. But as Lina said earlier, the government will manage information and try to give you as much as you want. Not as much as you want, as much as it wants you to know. And so that is the scenario that we have found ourselves in. And one would wonder why Kenyans were very interested. Kenyans and Tanzanians are very closely linked. Every so often you see on social media there's a banter between Kenyans and Tanzanians. And so it was expected that whatever was being done on social media would happen. And then talk about the whole question of whether he was in Nairobi or he was not in Nairobi. Whether he was actually destined for Nairobi or he wasn't, that now added to the fuel of speculation that we saw. But suffice to say, whatever has happened. But more importantly, it is a handling of COVID-19 by John Pombe Magufuli that probably even raised more speculation. Here is a president who told us that there's no corona in Tanzania. And at the same time, the social media and even the media platforms in Tanzania were told, don't talk about corona. So therein was a very specific reason why everybody had to find out where John Pombe Magufuli is. It cannot be possible that the whole world is talking about the presence of corona, but Tanzania, there isn't.
All right. And actually you have touched on something that we have to get into. I mean, if you think about John Pombe Magufuli, Linus, you have to think about the sort of different style that he brought. I mean, Tanzania, whereas there have been all these questions about how free it is. I mean, there's been lots of difficulties, some people from the region and all that getting in. But most Tanzanian presidents appear to be, calm-natured, and they are not aggressive. They are not out there in your face. Whoever you think about, especially now the predecessor, if you think about Jakaya Kikwete, I mean, a consummate diplomat, he was what other people say a very calm gentleman. But then here comes the bulldozer in the true nature of that word. So there was just a different thing about the style of John Pombe Magufuli.
And bulldozers are not something that Tanzanian politics and leadership was known for until John Pombe Magufuli came to the scene. Remember, even in the perceptions in Kenya generally is Tanzanian politics is polite. The personality, the persona of the politics of Tanzania is kind, it's gentle, and all those things. But we need to separate the politics from the administration, which is what and where Magufuli really excelled in terms of projecting this style that is aggressive, that is a go-getter kind of mentality, because he comes from a political background that is far less certain than that of most political leaders that have risen to that office. Magufuli was not a front runner in 2015 when he was going for the presidency. The true front runner was Edward Lowassa. It was supposed to be Lowassa that should have won that ticket. He was popular, he had the youth vote, he had quite a substantial control of the party apparatus. But one thing did him in, corruption allegations. And here then became the platform of Magufuli, Mr. Clean, the action man, anti-corruption, because in his record as minister, actually starting as assistant minister for housing, moving on to infrastructure minister between 1995 and 2015, here was a clean record. So he easily managed to sell this as his platform. But also it points out at the way the CCM party itself works. It works in mysterious ways. And I was lucky to witness in 2005 the transition from President Mkapa to Jakaya Kikwete in Dodoma. And the whole process of selecting a presidential candidate in CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi, is very much the same way what we see with the Chinese Communist Party, it is a very disciplined and deliberate process. There are no accidents in those elections. You can't really tweet your way to power or hashtag your way to the ticket of the party. These are people, and if you look at Magufuli is part of what they call Nyerere sons, people who have been mentored in their youth by the founding president of the country, Julius Nyerere. In that group, you will find the likes of Jakaya Kikwete, who became president at a very young age. So Magufuli happened, and what really, when you refer to his style, Joe, then you are referring to this person who is so driven in his own ways and a conviction politician. He had a lot of, he believed in his own philosophy, so much so that I feel that at some point, especially in the end of the first term, the party was not very, very happy with him, because they would feel he's pushing, he's doing things in a way that has not been done in the party before Joe.
Linus, before Joe comes in, you talk about how Magufuli was not the first choice for the party as flag bearer in 2014. In fact, 4 months to the elections, he was not seen as the strongest candidate until, of course, the corruption scandal emerged against the then Lowassa, who was the favorite. And of course, he was supported even by Benjamin Mkapa. In fact, 2 years into his first term, Mkapa came out publicly and supported his style of leadership. Some would say that part of the reason why he ended up becoming the front runner and getting the ticket, you've spoken about his clean record. He was Minister for Works. He was responsible for the building of a road at a time when Tanzania was plagued by various corruption scandals, in fact, in issues to do with infrastructure. But as minister back then, he was able to show what he was doing, and there was that road he built. But I think one of the other reasons is because that he was not affiliated within any factions in CCM. When there were all the politics going on around CCM, he was concentrating on his work. He was a cabinet minister for about 20 years, and at no particular time did he favor one or any other side of the party. That's why it was easy for him, kupita katikati yao, as they say, and become the flag bearer. Number one. Number two, as you said, he was a safe pair of hands, because CCM wanted to continue with its dominance of Tanzanian politics. And I think Magufuli represented someone who had no scandal. He was seen as a worker. He was no nonsense. His record spoke for himself. So he was able to be sold as someone who would take the country forward. And when he was elected in 2015, that's who he was. He stood for no corruption. He was going to deal with the civil service. In fact, I remember what would Magufuli do was a hashtag, trying to compare him with underperforming presidents. And he was that to many Tanzanians from the beginning. Things did change, but I think it's important to see where he came from to where he was.
PLO actually during that period talked about what he said, what we need in Africa is Magufulification of our politics.
I remember that. And I think that was an interesting time to just talk about the anti-corruption record. I mean, we all know infrastructure ministries are very lucrative, and that is where, a lot of corruption happens with, big projects which have, big spending. And he really did transform the road network within Tanzania as a whole. In fact, he was the one who put in place the rapid bus transport, mechanism. What we are still trying to figure out, here in this country.
With our red paint.
With our red paint.
Someone call it lipstick.
And lipstick on the roads. Yes, I remember that.
Is it continuous or broken?
Sorry, what's that?
It's continuous.
Is it continuous or broken?
No, it's
okay. We need to take a break.
I think we just the bulldozer record. And I remember when we were reporting on this, in the very beginning, it was him walking into offices and firing immigration officials, telling off others. But I really did begin to wonder, and I remember in a previous show that I used to host, asking about the place of institutions in Tanzania when he seemed to be the be-all and end-all of everything, ignoring many of the institutions that were there to essentially crack down on corruption and a number of these other things. And as later it proved, he wasn't just a bulldozer. And in terms of also reducing the costs, by the way, you remember he asked quite a few of his government officials to not take so many foreign trips. And that, of course, we'll talk about when it comes to his diplomacy, but this was the man that he was. Crackdown on corruption, crackdown on spending. But then all of this crackdown and the bulldozing ended up also becoming the bulldozing of human rights.
It was a shock therapy kind of leadership. You see, when you're used to a certain way of doing
Finish
things,
quickly
and then all of a sudden, here is a guy who comes in and wants to dominate everything. It may work to some extent, but it can also fail disastrously, because what it also means is that you're leaving institutions and personifying governance. That can easily craft a dictator.
All right, and that's where we are taking a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about a little bit about more about that style, but we'll also look at Magufuli's diplomacy as well as how he related with the rest of the world.